Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 1 2022 NFL predictions. Well, since for the first times since the Super Bowl, I am back, and I am so excited to be back for my 10th year of NFL predictions on this channel. It is always exciting this time of year, right around the Labor Day holiday, to get back into the NFL prediction swing. And I'm excited for all 270 plus games. This is the second season with the 17 game schedule. And boys, just a thrill to be back. So many crazy things happened this offseason to where the AFC became an arms race with all the different teams. It's the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos. The Chiefs got worse. The Miami Dolphins got better. The Bills maintained. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers transitioning out of the Ben Roethlisberger era into the post-Ben Roethlisberger era, either with Mitchell Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. And that'll be a very interesting story. You have the Bengals, who improved their offensive line, who brought back Jesse Bates, who added Lyle Collins, who brought in Hayden Hurst, and who look like they want to prove that they are a serious contender, not just for this year, but for moving on into future years. You have the whole Cleveland Browns dramatic story of them letting go of Baker Mayfield, or of them moving on from Baker Mayfield, trading him for a conditional 5th round pick to the Carolina Panthers to bring in former Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson, and all the controversy and off the stuff that happened with Deshaun, and those issues finally getting resolved. The 11 game suspension based off of those actions. But the Browns, do have still a quality roster, even though they also acquired Amari Cooper, who got traded from the Dallas Cowboys. There's really not a lot of AFC teams, if you really think about it, that are not at least respectable. Some definitely improved, some definitely went down. But a lot of the AFC, I would argue, outside of the Jets and the Houston Texans in a way, outside of those two teams, I really couldn't tell you a really horrible team. Maybe New England would be that barrier. I'd probably give Belichick some respect for his history, but this Patriots team, from what I've seen, has not looking great, and I do not think they're going to make the playoffs for the second time in 3 years post Tom Brady. I digress. But besides really those three teams, I really couldn't tell you a really bad team or a really great team. I think in a way you have just that range in the AFC that is so incredibly, competent that I think the AFC is going to, it clearly has the best teams in the respective conferences. Where you look at the NFC, and I look at the NFC, and it's very, very top-heavy, with really only 3 genuine teams at the top. You have the Los Angeles Rams, who, are the defending Super Bowl champions. Aaron Donald signed a 3-year, $93 million extension to come back. He did say he is only guaranteed to play the upcoming 2 seasons. The 3rd year is an option year. But I hope that Aaron Donald at least plays for another, I would say, 3 to 6, 7 years. Because I definitely think in that time, Aaron Donald, to me right now, is the second greatest defensive tackle to ever play the game of football, only behind Mr. Reggie White. If he plays another 5 years, I think he will be one of the greatest defenders ever. Greatest defenders ever. If he goes for, I would say, 7 or 8 more years, I genuinely believe this, and people in the comment section, I believe Aaron Donald can be in the conversation as the greatest defender of all time. In the LT, in the Deion Sanders, in the Reggie White, Bruce Smith, Deacon Jones, Mean Joe Green. If he plays 7 or 8 more years, I believe Aaron Donald can be in that greatest defender of all time conversation. But the Rams were able to get him back. They brought in Allen Robinson. They had Andrew Whitworth retire. They brought in, I guess they did re-sign Noteboom. They lost one of their centers, and they also lost Johnny Hekker. A very sneaky move. Johnny Hekker is now punting for the Carolina Panthers. But I think the Rams overall, though, they still have one of the more talented rosters in the league. They gave Cooper Kupp a very nice extension, and I think they should be the favorites to repeat as NFC Super Bowl representatives. The only team that I think genuinely has a chance behind them is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, everybody knows, it's been following the sport. In March, Tom Brady announced his retirement, and then in less than 50 days, he was so eager, and he could not shake it, especially after the year he had where he led the league in passing, and a lot of people think he should have been the rightful MVP over Aaron Rodgers. Decided to come back for a 23rd season, but this season for them has already kind of been up and down. They've lost already their starting center, Ryan Jensen, and another one of their guards to significant near season-ending injuries. They do not have Ndamukong Suh back. They did bring in Akeem Hicks. Rob Gronkowski retired again, or retired for the second time, though Drew Rosenhaus did say recently that he does expect Rob Gronkowski possibly to come back to play with Brady again, but they re-signed Kyle Rudolph in that way to replace him. They brought in Julio Jones. They brought back Leonard Fournette. They brought in Russell Gage. They still have Carlton Davis and Antoine Winfield. They still have Devontae David and Devin White at linebacker. And they have shifted over to Todd Bowles, the former defensive coordinator and former head coach of the New York Jets, as the new head coach. I am not the biggest fan of retreads, and Todd Bowles is a retread, even though you could argue again it was the Jets organization. However, for Todd Bowles, I think this is, for him, a very rare opportunity for a coach of his ilk to get, and hopefully he can move the coaching process forward for people like him with this team. And again, with Tom Brady, I think he might, I think he's going to play for another 2 years after this, because if you notice, all the free agents for the Bucs, for the most part, besides Julio and Kyle Rudolph, the veterans, they all signed 3-year contracts. If they knew that Tom was basically going to play this year, or they had an inkling from private conversations, why would they sign 3-year commitments to a team that if Tom Brady leaves, maybe they would be the ones that would get Jimmy Garoppolo after the Niners, but, who knows. But I definitely think that Tom Brady will play beyond this year and get to 25 and then maybe call it a career there. But who knows? I could be dead wrong, and we'll see about that. Yeah, but then there's that, because I think after that in the NFC, you have Green Bay, who is basically going to rely on Aaron Rodgers predominantly for the most part. I think Aaron's going to play well. I do not think he's going to win the MVP. He's not going to be, I think it's going to be very Nikola Jokic to cross sports for a second, even though I know Aaron Rodgers is a much better player and athlete compared to Nikola Jokic. But I just do not think the voters are going to give him a third year, unless he puts up similar numbers with Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Sammy Watkins as his primary receivers. If he does, then he kind of deserves it, because that's an incredible feat on Aaron Rodgers. But then after that, once you get past those three teams, you have the Niners, maybe, and that's a lot depending on Trey Lance, who's now the starting quarterback for the 49ers. The Niners, definitely, they lost some talent, but they were able to bring back Debo Samuel, on a 3-year, $72.5 million contract extension. They're going to get George Kittle back healthy. They still have Trent Williams, the best offensive lineman in football. They have Nick Bosa still. They still have Eric Armstead. They still have Fred Warner. So that Niners team is very good. I just don't know, with Trey Lance as going into his third career start this coming Sunday against the Bears, I don't know how well he's going to do. The track record of North Dakota State quarterbacks isn't that great, because the last guy that did that, he's been on 3 teams over the last 3 seasons, and that's Carson Wentz. I think Trey's more gifted and talented purely than Carson, but, he's only played a couple college games. And this is the one thing I would say personally as a fan. Everybody in the media is saying, oh, Trey Lance, the crap's going to have to go on him. Because it's like, he's in the best ready-made situation. Because you could say Zach Wilson has the Jets organization, Mac Jones, the Patriots. Bill gave Joe Judge and Patricia all these opportunities. Trevor Lawrence is still Trevor Lawrence, and he's in Jacksonville, for crying out loud. But it's like Trey Lance, he's going to be the bum if he can't make this team work. No, don't do that. I don't believe in that. The people that should deserve the most blame is Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan, if Trey Lance fails, deserves to get fired. Okay? This is all Kyle Shanahan. This is a guy that traded he and John Lynch. Yeah, and John Lynch, does deserve some blame as well, though I'd put more on Kyle Shanahan than John Lynch. But those two guys put their entire future on this guy. And remember, Kyle Shanahan's had 3 losing seasons in his 5 years as the head coach of the 49ers. What this will tell you if Trey Lance doesn't work is that Kyle Shanahan is not very good. I get the fact that he has 4 playoff wins. But at the end of the day, at coaching, getting there consistently is better than having very big highs and incredibly bad lows. Okay? So if Trey Lance fails, and he decides to stick with him, and he should stick with him for the rest of the year, even though Jimmy Garoppolo is back on a 1-year, $6.5 million fully guaranteed deal, which is up to, I think, about $17 million with incentives, this is on Kyle Shanahan's head. And if they have a losing season this year, or you know what, I'll even get it, if they do not make the playoffs, Kyle Shanahan deserves to get terminated, and I believe, even though with a Super Bowl appearance, he should never be an NFL head coach again. Okay, I do not think he is that great. I thought he has been, vastly overrated for the last few years because he just keeps choking a lot of close games, even with all the injuries. But that's what I think Kyle Shanahan deserves more of the blame, not Trey Lance, because Trey Lance got gifted the situation, and Kyle should get none of the blame at all for what was happening. No, Kyle should get a majority of the blame if Trey can't do well, because again, remember, he's only played 4 games in 3 years due to the circumstances going around. But then just moving on from the NFC, to keep going, sorry, my little diatribe there, you have the Eagles, who are a good squad. You have all the Eagles are a good squad. You have the Cowboys who are on a bit of a downturn. But then after that, the Commanders, the Giants, the Bears, the Lions, the Seahawks, who are going to be one of the worst teams in the league, the Falcons, the Panthers. That's a lot of just meh. Where I think a lot of people look at those teams and go, they're not playoff teams. Okay? I think the Saints could be, and I think the Minnesota Vikings will be. Okay? But that's what I'm saying. The NFC, it's just not as top-heavy. Because I just think when you look at the Rams, Bucks, and arguably you want to debate the Packers, everybody else below them, they're not better than those 3 teams. And again, you could debate about the Packers. But definitely the Rams and Buccaneers, every one of those teams below them, they are clearly better in almost every single facet, in my opinion. And the only one I can say out of those is that the Niners pop with Trey Lance. So those are my little, quick notes on everything going around the league for the offseason. Before I get into my Week 1 picks, once again, as I've said over the last several years, I do these predictions every week or every year for fun. And I love giving my own opinions, and I love interacting with all the viewers that watch, and I appreciate all you viewers. But if you don't like what I have to say, or you don't, want to hear what I say, you don't have to watch me. You don't have to give any comments about my, appearance or any of those, personal things. If you have opinions about my takes and you want to give yours, that's fine. But any personal attacks or appearance, if you don't like what I'm doing, you don't have to watch me. Or if make your own content. We're in a world that's becoming more self-driven, by the day. So if you are a football fan and you want to give your own opinions, all it takes is a camera or your cell phone or just a camera and a video and just being able to send it on your own channel, and you can make your own content and have people, interact that way and spread your own. That's the great thing about this platform and what I do. So I just want to put that out there for everyone again, about just why I make these picks every year, and just for pure fun and excitement and just for interaction with people that enjoy football just as much as I do. Okay, so with that out of the way, it is time for my Week 1 predictions. And as I said in my last video, to wrap up Super Bowl 56, my Super Bowl prediction is going to remain the same. I have the opening game as the Super Bowl in Arizona. So it will be, in my opinion, the Buffalo Bills taking on the Los Angeles Rams at State Farm Stadium at Super Bowl 57. Once again, I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills and Los Angeles Rams at Super Bowl 57 in Glendale at State Farm Stadium. Alright, but speaking of that, to go right into the segue of the games, so on Thursday, September 8th, opening night, where Ozzy Osbourne is performing at the halftime show. Shout out to Andrew Warren for that bit of information. The Buffalo Bills are traveling to SoFi Stadium to take on the defending Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. The Buffalo Bills are 2.5-point favorites in this game. And in a rarity to usually what happens in the season, I am going to take the visiting team to beat the defending Super Bowl champs in the opening game. I am going to take the Buffalo Bills here to beat the Los Angeles Rams. The Buffalo Bills are favored by 2.5 points. I am going to take the Buffalo Bills here minus 2.5 and the Buffalo Bills straight up. And then on Sunday, September 11th, the first opening Sunday of the year, when the New Orleans Saints travel to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The New Orleans Saints are 5.5-point favorites in this game. I like the New Orleans Saints here, so it could be the New Orleans Saints here, minus 5.5, and New Orleans Saints straight up. Then the next game, when the San Francisco 49ers travel to Soldier Field to take on the Chicago Bears. The San Francisco 49ers are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me the San Francisco 49ers here straight up. But for my first difference here against the spread, I'm actually going to take the Chicago Bears here plus 7 to at least, cover. The Bears will at least cover the 7 points. So once again, I have the San Francisco 49ers here winning straight up, but I have the Chicago Bears plus 7. Then the next game, when the Pittsburgh Steelers travel to the brand new Paycor Stadium. That's right for anybody out there. A couple weeks ago, the Cincinnati Bengals reached an agreement with a local banking chain called Paycor to have the naming rights of the Paul Brown Stadium officially changed to Paycor Stadium. That is a 15-year agreement, so for moving forward, the Bengals Stadium for the next several years will be called Paycor Stadium, just like as everybody knows. Heinz, just the month before, announced that they ended their agreement with the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, and Acrisure, a local an insurance firm out in Michigan, bought the rights for 15 years, and the Pittsburgh Steelers Stadium will now be called Acrisure Stadium. But I digress. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are traveling to Paycor Stadium to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Cincinnati Bengals here, minus 6.5, and the Cincinnati Bengals straight up. Then the next game, when the Philadelphia Eagles travel to Ford Field to take on the Detroit Lions. The Philadelphia Eagles here are 4-point favorites in this game. Give me the Philadelphia Eagles here, minus 4, and the Philadelphia Eagles straight up. Then the next game, when the New England Patriots travel to Hard Rock Stadium to take on the Miami Dolphins in an AFC East matchup. The Miami Dolphins are 3-point favorites in this game. This is one of those weird games to where it's the Miami Dolphins, it's the Patriots, and I know the history of it, but I don't know how Tua's going to do. I know the Dolphins have clearly the better football team. I'm going to take them straight up, but with it being week 1, with it being the Pats, knowing how bad they played the last time, week 17 last year in Miami, I think the Patriots play a little bit better, and it's only 3 points, but I am going to hedge this game, so I'm going to take the Miami Dolphins here to win straight up, but giving the New England Patriots plus 3. Then the next game, when the Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Washington in FedEx Field to take on the brand new, the football team era is over, and the Commanders are in when they take on the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me the Commanders minus 3 and the Commanders straight up. Then the next game, in the revenge game for Baker Mayfield, when the Cleveland Browns travel to North Carolina, Charlotte, to take on the Carolina Panthers at Bank of America Stadium. The Carolina Panthers are 2.5-point favorites in this game. This is one of those weird games to where this is an even toss-up. I think both these teams, you trust the Browns roster, or if you're going to go with the quarterback, you're going to take the better quarterback. And since Deshaun Watson is suspended for the first 11 games, that'll be Jacoby Brissett starting for the Browns. I'm going to go with the better quarterback here, so I'm going to take the Carolina Panthers here straight up, and also Carolina minus 2.5. Then the next game, when the Indianapolis Colts travel to NRG Stadium to take on the Houston Texans. The Indianapolis Colts are 8-point favorites in this game. Give me the Indianapolis Colts here minus 8 and the Indianapolis Colts straight up. Then the next game, when the New York Giants travel to Nashville to Nissan Stadium to take on the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Tennessee Titans here minus 5.5 and the Tennessee Titans straight up. Then the next game, one of the biggest games of the week, when the Green Bay Packers travel to U.S. Bank Stadium to take on the Minnesota Vikings in their home opener, a great NFC North battle. The Green Bay Packers here are only 1.5-point favorites in this game. I know there are people out there that believe the Vikings are going to be one of the most improved teams. And as I said before earlier in the video, I do have the Minnesota Vikings making the playoffs. However, at the end of the day, they still have Mr. Number 8, Mr. Mediocre and Average. Mr. In the big moments, he will always shrink, even though I know he beat the Packers last year in this game, in this same time slot. Different week, but same time slot. I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers here, -1.5, and the Green Bay Packers straight up, because I'm going to trust Aaron Rodgers, even with all the talent that's going on the offensive side, to be able to carry the Packers into a win over the Vikings, who clearly have probably the better overall team in most areas, but I just have to I'm going to just trust the quarterback here. And for everybody out there that can prove that right or wrong, good for them. So that's why the Green Bay Packers here -1.5, and the Green Bay Packers straight up. Then the next game, when the Kansas City Chiefs travel to State Farm Stadium to take on the Arizona Cardinals, the Kansas City Chiefs are 4.5-point favorites in this game. I am going to take Kansas City here straight up, but due to everything that the Chiefs lost in the offseason, especially Tyreek Hill, they lost the Honey Badger, they lost some other defenders, they did bring back Orlando Brown on the franchise tag, but I'm just not very sold on Kansas City being able to cover, so I'm going to take Kansas City here straight up, but I will take the Arizona Cardinals +4.5. Then the next game, in one of my favorite games of the week, when the Las Vegas Raiders go to SoFi Stadium, or for a rarity for Los Angeles, they get to host both games, to take on the Los Angeles Chargers, the AFC team in LA. The Los Angeles Chargers are 3-point favorites in this game. I really thought about hedging this one because I do think the Raiders, as much as I am not a Josh McDaniels fan, and as much as Derek Carr, good for him, he got an extension and all that, and I don't think they're going to be that great. I do think losing J.C. Jackson, probably for the game due to that arthroscopic knee surgery, is not great. But at the end of the day, the Raiders' offensive line is very bad. So that's why at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the Chargers here, -3 in the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. Then in the first Sunday night game of the year, it's going to be a rematch of the opening night game last year, when except this time, it's going to be in Jerry's world. When the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Dallas, AT&T Stadium, to take on the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, because God knows we need to see the Dallas Cowboys, as mediocre and as up and down as they've been in primetime television. It's going to be Tampa Bay at Dallas. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are amazingly, from the book I've been reading, are only 1.5-point favorites in this game. I am going to take Tampa Bay here, -1.5, and Tampa Bay straight up. And finally, in the very conveniently planned game for Monday Night Football, the former Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson, who made one of the biggest splashes this offseason by being traded to the Denver Broncos for 2 number 1 picks, 3 players, and a couple other picks moving down the road. He goes back to Seattle, his first game in the Troy Aikman, Joe Buck Monday Night Football era. As an announcer story, if anybody doesn't know, Troy Aikman and Joe Buck have signed 5-year contracts to become the official voices for Monday Night Football. They are leaving NFL on Fox, meaning that Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson are now the new number 1 co-announcers. Aaron Andrews is still staying at Fox, and Tom Rinaldi is still going to be at the other team sideways. But that's your little quick announcing stuff if you're into stuff like that, like I am. So their first Monday night game is going to be the Denver Broncos traveling to Lumen Field to take on the Seattle Seahawks. The Denver Broncos are 6.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take the Denver Broncos here, -6.5, and the Denver Broncos straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Buffalo Bills over the Los Angeles Rams. This is a game to where I am going to trust that I believe the Buffalo Bills are going to be the Super Bowl 57 champions. They're going to be the Super Bowl champs this year. And I believe they are better than the Rams. I know the Bills, they don't have the running depth. Even though I know the Bills, they have Devin Singletary, they still have Zach Moss, and they drafted James Cook out of Georgia, who's a pretty solid back. The Rams' offensive line, like I mentioned before, they don't have Whitworth anymore. They cut Saffold. They brought back Noteboom. But they lost their center, who I believe went to Kansas City. Yeah, I believe went to Kansas City. And I just, you have the Rams defense. They did bring back Aaron Donald. But I don't know what that Rams secondary. I know they brought back Troy Hill. They still have Ramsey. It's still a great team. I just think the Buffalo Bills are just better. After watching that divisional playoff game, everybody knows that Josh Allen deserved a second shot at the ball. I always thought that basically in overtime, and I've thought this for years. Anyway, you can watch some previous videos where I mentioned this. I've always thought that I always loved the college system of overtime, where you just keep going back and forth until somebody can't score. What I always hated about the college system was you always start at 25. I always think in college, you should always kick the ball off like you do in the NFL at overtime. But I digress. But I just think the Buffalo Bills have the best roster in the entire league. And this is a game against the defending champs with Allen, with his confidence, with the team around him, and just the expectation of what people want to bring. I think they are able to win this game. I think Gabe Davis should have a solid game. They have Isaiah McKenzie, who's a good speedster. Dawson Knox, again, also condolences to him just recently last month. His brother, I believe Florida FIU, Luke Knox, passed away unexpectedly. I never found out what that was going. I never found out what happened for him there. But best wishes to him and his family for that incident. But I just think the Buffalo Bills have the best overall roster in this game. I think that Josh Allen will be able to outplay Stafford a bit. Stafford at the end of the day, even though as great as he really was only able to find Cooper Kupp, at the end. And he did have 2 bad interceptions. And people would make the argument that before Odell Beckham Jr. tore his ACL for the second time, that Odell Beckham Jr. probably was going to be the Super Bowl MVP with the way he was starting out. But also at the same time, since they don't have Odell Beckham, they also don't have Von Miller, who signed a 6-year, $120 million contract with the Buffalo Bills. So even though the Rams are going to change their roster and their schemes, Von knows a lot of those guys there, and he knows exactly what they want to do. And I think Von, he was named a team captain. I think Von's leadership in that moment will help them go against the Rams' offensive line, which is not going to be as good. And I just think Josh Allen outplays Stafford in this type of game. I know Matthew Stafford recently had been dealing with some tendonitis in his elbow, but apparently the other day Sean McVay said that should not limit him for this opening night game on Thursday. But I'm just going to trust the Bills with all the talent they have. I know they don't have Trey White, which will be significant, and I know the Rams brought in Allen Robinson, and Van Jefferson could be playing as well. I just think the Bills are just the best overall roster. They have a lot of momentum. They have a lot of confidence, momentum, and I think they beat the Rams in a very fantastic game. Would the Rams beating the Bills surprise me? Not at all. I think, like I said, the Rams are going to be the NFC team. Like, this is my Super Bowl opening night. I genuinely believed, and this was before even the schedule came out, I thought these were the 2 best teams in the league coming out of last year. And knowing everything that was going on, I thought these were going to be the 2 best teams moving forward, and I think they're going to put on a fantastic show. At the end of the day, I just think Allen outplays Stafford by a little bit, and the Bills roster just makes a couple more plays compared to the Rams. Again, if the Rams win, that's not going to be a big surprise. I think, again, that'd be huge. And that'd be a great opening statement for their title defense, because that would pretty much tell you that they, feel confident they're going to do it again. But I'm going to take the Bills. Better overall roster. I think they have the confidence from last year. They're motivated from that divisional loss, heartbreaking it was, to win this game against the Rams in a very entertaining and hopefully memorable opening night game for the 2022 season. So that's like the Buffalo Bills here, -2.5, and the Buffalo Bills straight up. The next game, the New Orleans Saints over the Atlanta Falcons. This one to me was fairly simple. I do not think the Atlanta Falcons are going to be that great this year. They traded Matt Ryan for a 3rd-round pick to Indianapolis. They've let Julio Jones go. They let Hayden Hurst go. I know they still have Jake Matthews and the other guard they drafted last year with that other 1st-round pick. They did have Cordero Patterson, who did re-sign with them, which was, I thought, a good move to have to bring him back. But they're trying to move on from, they've been trying to move on from Grady Jarrett and Deion Jones, but they're going to keep them because they pay contracts. The corners besides Terrell are really not that great. They let KZ go. They let Keanu Neal go. I'm not saying that those guys were phenomenal. Vic Beat, that Falcons team just is not really well built in a lot of places. They had to trade for Brian Edwards. Calvin Ridley is suspended for the year due to the gambling that he put on, I believe, FanDuel. And, that's a whole different conversation about what your opinion on, that versus other suspensions or whatnot, but I'm not going to get into that. But this Falcons team is not very well constructed, and I really genuinely believe Arthur Smith, he's not going to be able to maintain his job. You could say it's fair or not because, the rebuild and all that, but I don't know. I just think they already need Mariota to start right even before camp started, and they did draft Desmond Ridder, who's going to be the future quarterback of the team. I just look at this Falcons team and just go, that's not a great team. And I look at the Saints and go, look, for as much turnover as the Saints have had, with Sean Payton leaving or retiring temporarily, in my opinion, I still think the Saints team has a very good roster. They lost to Ron Armstead to the Dolphins. I understand that. They still have Cesar Ruiz. They still have a decent left guard, even though Trevor Penning, their first-round pick out of Northwestern, I believe, he had a significant turf toe injury. But the good news is they said that he could likely come back maybe November instead of December. The Alvin Kamara suspension is still looming over the team. He's not going to be suspended as of what I've heard as of now, but I guess depending on what time, he will probably serve a 6-game suspension sometime this season. They still have Adam Troutman. They're having Jameis Winston, who signed a 2-year contract extension, come back, and he's going to be the main starting quarterback. They have Adam Troutman, who I like at tight end. They're going to use Taysom Hill now, since Sean Payton is gone, and that is the worst contract in the NFL, a $40 million tight end who has not even really played tight end that well, because John Payton really obviously thought he could have been a decent quarterback, or the, Sam Ellinger of the NFL. No offense to Sam Ellinger, but that kind of player. And Dennis Allen does not see that in Taysom Hill, because nobody outside of John Payton saw that much of a quarterback in Taysom Hill. But besides that, the Saints roster, look, they still have Bradley Roby. They still have Marshawn Lattimore. They still have, they brought in Honeybat. They brought in Tyrann Mathieu since Malcolm Jenkins left. They have Adebo, another good safety. I like a young safety from him. They lost to Marcus Williams, who came to the Baltimore Ravens, and they just traded Chancey Gardner-Johnson to the Eagles based on how much that they had in safety. They still have Demario Davis, who's one of the best middle linebackers in the league. They still have Cam Jordan, one of the best pass rushers. They still have, I think, no, Rankins left. I'm sorry, not showing Rankins. But they still have a good linebacking core, and their receiver core got improved with the additions of Chris Olave from the draft, Michael Thomas coming back from his foot injuries that's made him cost 2 years. They brought in Jarvis Landry. So they have 3 or 4 receivers for James to throw the ball to. They still have Mark Ingram, and the offensive line's solid. So I think this Saints team is clearly going to be better than this Falcons team. I think, again, in the Saints, they're arguably my 7th team this year. To me, the 7 playoff teams in the NFC are going to be the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Packers, the Vikings, the Eagles, Rams, Buccaneers, Eagles, Cardinals, Rams, Buccaneers, Packers, Eagles, Cardinals, Vikings. So there are my 6 teams there. Those are my 6 locks in the NFC. And then the 7th team to me is debating between the San Francisco 49ers and New Orleans Saints. That's debatable, but I do think the Saints are a definite playoff or wild card contender. And with their history against the Buccaneers, they could even win the NFC South if they can sweep the Bucs again, which they've done 2 of the last 2 seasons of the regular season. But I just think in the Saints, they just have a clearly better roster in a lot of different areas. I think Jameis may turn the ball over a bit more, but in the short sample size he had, he didn't do that bad. So I don't think he's gonna instantly, with Sean Payton out of the building, he's not instantly gonna turn back into regular Jameis that we all know and hate. He's not gonna throw 30 interceptions for this coming year. But do I think the Falcons can compete? Sure, it's week 1, and who knows? With Mariota, with Patterson, with Edwards, with Kyle Pitts, who's gonna be their big number 1 receiver now. Who knows how the Falcons are gonna do? I just think the Saints team just overall fundamentally is clearly better. So that's why I like the New Orleans Saints here, -5.5, and New Orleans Saints straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Chicago Bears. This is one to where the Niners, this is me just taking the roster. Justin Fields, if anybody watched any of the Bears preseason, he did an incredible job. I believe he had a 70+ completion percentage. He also had 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. He definitely seemed like he improved. But just looking at that Bears roster, the offensive line is not great at all. They were trying to trade Telvin Jenkins, or they were trying to take calls for a pick that they had, second-round pick last year. At least they weren't the Raiders, who cut their first-round pick from last year, Leatherwood. and they still have to eat $7 million in dead cap because he was that bad. But I digress. But I just look at this Bears roster, and I like Montgomery had an okay year. Darnell Mooney's really their only legitimate receiving threat. Cole Kmet's not bad. But I just look at that Bears roster and go, they just lost N'Keal Harry. Velus Jones is his 25-year-old receiver out of Tennessee. Like, Byron Pringle, it's not great. And you just look at the Niners and go, okay, you like Ayuk, you like Debo, you like Kittle, you have the offensive line, led by Trent Williams, the left tackle. They still have McGlinchey. I think they still have, I know Alex Mack retired. I know that, so he's not there. But they still have the center who's okay. And I just think, again, they still have Elijah Mitchell and the stable running backs that they brought in, even though they cut Trey Sermon, who ended up getting picked up by the Eagles. I just look at the 49ers, they just clearly have the better roster. But the reason why, and I think that's why the Niners are going to win the game, but I'm taking the Bears +7 because it's Trey Lance. And this Bears defense, look, it's been stripped down to its core. No more Khalil Mack, no more Kyle Fuller, no more, they now have Kyler Gordon. Instead of Kyle Fuller, they have Kyler Gordon, who's going to be one of their main corners moving forward now. And they have Roquan Smith, who wanted to get traded earlier this year. And he said he will play it out. And I think, the Bears defense, they still have some pride. And Eberflus was a qualified individual. He had been with the Indianapolis Colts for 4 years, defensive coordinator. I believe he had 3 or 4 top 10 finishes with that defense. But he doesn't have DeForest Buckner, Shaquille Leonard, or Kenny Moore, any of those other talents the Colts had during those few years while he was there. Because they didn't even bring in Ogunjobi, who they thought they were going to get from Cincinnati. He ended up going to Pittsburgh. But I'm going to take the Bears on the line because I think Justin Fields, I think he could surprise some people going against this weaker San Francisco secondary. They lost Tart. They don't have Sherman anymore. I guess they brought back Jason Verrett, but we all know he's going to get a blast knee. He's going to end up getting hurt, in the first 2 games. It's unfortunate because he was really talented when he started playing, but the injury bug just never seems to, he never seems to get away from biting the pipe. But I'm going to take the Bears +7 because I think, again, Justin Fields, I think, will play better. And I think that he will be able to make some plays. I don't know if Trey Lance will. I think the Niners roster will definitely overcompensate for what, compared to the Bears roster. But I just think, again, like the Bears, I think they're going to be more competitive than you think because I looked at Fields, I looked at how they were playing, I like some of their assets. I don't think they're going to win because I think the Niners just clearly have a better roster and most assets. But I think the Bears cover at least from 7. So we'll see about that. Sounds like the San Francisco 49ers here straight up. It's Chicago Bears +7. The next game, the Cincinnati Bengals over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one to where the Bengals are, I believe, the third best overall team in the AFC. I think the Buffalo Bills and Los Angeles Chargers entering the season. You could argue the Bengals are second, but I have the Chargers second. They have the third best roster in the entire league. Joe Burrow coming off, one of the most improbable runs that anybody thought, a guy could have. Definitely a comeback player of the year. Definitely an MVP, kind of a little bit of a dark horse. He's not Allen or Herbert or, but definitely, in that top 5 conversation. They improved the offensive line. They kept most of their defenders. They brought back Jesse Bates. He signed his franchise tag. And I just think, again, this Bengals roster is ready for the next step moving forward. And Lou Anarumo could definitely be a name if he has another good year with the way Trey Hendrickson played, with the way DJ Reader played, the way that defense played. I do think he might get some head coaching looks in the future. And also, the Bengals last year, for the first time, they swept the Pittsburgh Steelers in pretty decisive games, especially a game in Cincinnati. I believe they won 42, the 17. It was an absolute rout. I do not think it is going to be that bad, but I think they will at least cover. I would say even if this was a 9.5 point spread, I think they win this game by 10 points. That's how much confidence I have in the Cincinnati Bengals winning this game. Look, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they re-signed Minka. They got some new offensive linemen. But, they drafted Kenny Pickett. They brought in Miles Jack. They brought in Malik Reed. They brought in Levi Wallace and Ahkello Witherspoon. They brought in George Pickens and Calvin Austin to pair with Claypool. They lost Juju to Kansas City. They still have Pat Freiermuth, a good tight end. But it's just, Mike Tomlin hasn't announced a quarterback yet. And if it's Mitchell Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, or as I will affectionately call him, Kenny Tiny Hands Pickett, with his very small hands that I think were just about a little bit smaller than Joe Burrow's even, and because that's that kind of the great thing about that. If it's Trubisky or Kenny Tiny Hands Pickett, I don't think. I don't think it's gonna matter. I think the Bengals are just clearly the better team. It's kind of a rarity because through the history of these franchises, the Steelers have always been the team that just fundamentally about 85% of the time is better than the Bengals. And I just think now with this transition, I think the Bengals are just it's clearly the opposite for the first time in a while. I think the Bengals are clearly the better football team. They improved in a lot of ways. They kept some of the key positions they needed to. They improved. They got they lost Uzama. They brought in Hayden Hurst, which I thought was a decent move. I think Uzama might have a brighter future just because of his age, but I think Hayden Hurst is a solid tight end option for the year that they got him. I thought they were going to bring in O.J. Howard, but apparently he signed with the Houston Texans, but I digress. But I like the Cincinnati Bengals here. I just think they have a clearly better roster. I think that Joe Burrow and then Jamar Chase could easily become the best receiver in the National Football League this year. I just think he's that talented. He already did it as a rookie. He definitely can keep moving forward. And I just think the Bengals in that new stadium with the confidence of where they are, they know who they are, and they don't want to be. It's kind of like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. It's kind of like Buffalo. I feel like Cincinnati's like Buffalo last year, ironically against Pittsburgh. Buffalo was this hot team that everybody thought was going to be this great thing. Josh Allen had just signed his extension. They brought all this talent in, and they lay a massive egg against the Steelers. Everybody the next Monday just starts laughing at Josh Allen and the Bills, going, "You lost to an old, decrepit Ben Roethlisberger and the broken remains of the Pittsburgh Steelers." So I feel like for Pittsburgh, if they do this again, it kind of puts that same thing in Cincinnati to go, well, Cincinnati, you had your run, you got hot, you got lucky, but that was more luck than actually proven skill. But so that's like the Cincinnati Bengals here, -6.5, and Cincinnati Bengals straight up. The next game, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Detroit Lions. This is one to where, look, the Philadelphia Eagles, they made a lot of great improvements to their roster. They brought in A.J. Brown. They brought in Hassan Reddick. They brought in Chancey Gardner-Johnson. They brought in James Bradbury. This is an Eagles team that I think is clearly the best team in the NFC East, and they should be the division favorite. However, I'm going to take them to win this game, and I know the Eagles blew out the Lions last year. However, just for everybody out there, okay, I am just going to say this. The Detroit Lions in their last 6 games did go 500. And I am somebody that usually doesn't go for emotion, but I like Dan Campbell, the human being. And you could see after they beat the Cardinals, after they beat the Packers, and even after they beat the Vikings on that stupid last play where they played prevent in that kind of coverage, and Amon-Ra St. Brown caught his first touchdown for the win. But shout out to Halfton's Picks. Congrats, buddy. Yeah, I was happy for you. Frustrated with my pick, but I'll move forward. I think the Detroit Lions, they can actually compete in this game a little bit better than people will give them credit for. I think that, I'd be moderately surprised. I'm not gonna go shocked. That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions won this game, but I would be like mild to moderately surprised. I'll just put it that way. Because the Lions, look, they showed some fight. They brought in DJ Chark. They brought in some other assets. They have Aiden Hutchins, who's going to be a phenomenal, I think, pass rusher. The Penei Sewell definitely going to improve. They brought in the former Packer running back who I like. They still have DeAndre Swift. They still have Hawkinson. They still, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I think is going to be, kind of emerging as a hidden receiver, and he'll kind of be, kind of the gem in the Lions moving forward. I think the Lions can compete against the Eagles. I think the Lions can compete against them better than people think. All right, so this game should be entertaining. Because I think in a way Philadelphia, they have a lot of expectation. The Lions don't. The Lions could surprise people just like they did at the end of last year. But I think at the end of the day, the Eagles with their offensive line, with the lack of defense, Hutchinson's first game, I think the Eagles win this game at least by a touchdown. I would say that this was 6.5. I'd still take them at 6.5. I think they win by 7. The line was 4. That's why Philadelphia -4 and Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the Miami Dolphins over New England Patriots. This is one where history and just talent come into play here. The New England Patriots have a losing record through Belichick and Brady and that post in Miami. They just it seems like every couple years, out of like every 4 years, they at least 2 times in Miami over a 4-year span. Every single, all the time throughout Belichick's run with Brady and moving forward. And I just think, again, like it's a great thing for Pats fans because you could argue, hey, They're done with that now. They don't have to go to Miami for the rest of the year. Yeah, but at the end of the day, at the end of the day, the guys done a great thing, especially with that Pats roster, which did not make that many improvements. They got on Devontae Parker. They brought in that one tackle from the draft. They let N'Keal Harry go for a 7th round pick. James White retired. They let go of Malcolm Butler. They, let go of a couple of their tight ends they drafted a couple of years ago. They still have Hunter and Jonnu. They're letting Matt Patricia call plays. They're letting Joe Judge, work, with their roster. And I'm like, that's not great. Like, there's a reason why those two guys, after 2 or 3 years, came back, because they couldn't really make it on their own. And that's what I'm saying. Like, Miami, clearly, I just think, again, they have a new head coach. They brought in Cedric Wills. They brought in Chase Edmonds. They brought in a lot of good talent. They re-signed Xavier Howard to a 5-year extension. They have Javon Holland, who I like. They have Jerome Baker. They have Christian Wilkins. They have Emmanuel Ogbah re-signed on a 4-year extension. They brought in Tyreek Hill from Kansas City. They have Mike Gesicki coming on a franchise tag. Like, this Dolphins team is a very talented roster, pretty much neck down, besides the head of the quarterback, with Tua, who is in definitely a make-or-break situation. And I think it's very much the opposite of, like, Trey Lance and Mike McDaniel. Where I do think with that one, that Mike McDaniel does not deserve nearly as much blame. That's more on Tua. This is his 3rd year in the system. I know Tua kind of getting that Jason Campbell role of, like, having to go through different coordinators this early in his career. It's not fun. But, this is what the Dolphins management did. They gave him a very talented roster to work with. But the reason why I'm taking the Patriots +3 is just because of that uncertainty with Tua. I think Mac Jones is a better pure quarterback than Tua. And if Mac, from what I've you heard from in the beginning of training camp, by the end, Mac got a lot better. He got bigger. He seemed to get more accurate, but also at the same time that the entire rest of the team could not protect him to save his life, or they could not really move the football down the field. So, that's the thing. I wonder what's going to come out in the middle of that. But at the end of the day, that's why I'll take the Patriots, just because, I don't know how Tua's going to do. I think Tua will do okay, but will he, beat the brakes off of them? Who knows? They should. Yeah, I think the Dolphins just clearly have better of a roster. But I'm going to take the Patriots +3 here just because of my apprehension towards Tua. And if I have to eat this one, and I should have gone with the Dolphins -3, I'll accept that. But that's something I would be willing to take. So that's why I like the Miami Dolphins here to win straight up, and the New England Patriots +3. The next game, the Baltimore Ravens over the New York Jets. This is fairly easy for me. The Ravens, even through all the controversy with Lamar Jackson, even with trading Hollywood Brown for a 1st-round pick to the Cardinals, which was the right move, I just think we are clearly just the better football team than the New York Jets, who, had a great draft, getting Garrett Wilson, getting those 3 first-round picks, getting Sauce Gardner, getting Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State. But they lost Mekhi Becton to an injury. Zach Wilson is going to be either very shaky to play, or he's not even going to play. So you're going to have 37-year-old Joe Flacco. If you watch the Giants-Jets final preseason game, that was not pretty. And I just think for the Ravens, we're still going to have Lamar Jackson. Even if Lamar said afterward, we were not going to play, I think Tyler Huntley, with how well he's done in the games he had, the last 6 games last year, I think Tyler Huntley could have beat the Jets with the roster we have. Because, we have Rashad Bateman. We have Marcus Robinson. We have Mark Andrews. We have a new great center. We have Ronnie Stanley hopefully coming back soon. Our secondary will be back with Marcus Peters coming into the fold. We have Marcus Williams in that secondary. We have Kyle Hamilton into that secondary. We have Patrick Queen, Odafe Owe. We have Tyus Bowser. We have a good, solid defense of young guys and veterans playing together. We have Harrison. We have Chuck Clark, who's still there, even though I know he wants to get traded. We have just a better overall fundamental team. We have the best kicker in football. The first NFL top 100 kicker to make it, which was great. But I just think the Ravens, their history with the Jets, we beat them pretty much most of the time. And I think in a way the Ravens, even with the lack of receivers that people want to question, I think we easily go in there. We run the ball down their throats with Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake, and we win this game to move on to week 2 against where we get to play and it's funny because the Ravens actually play the AFC East, the whole AFC East in the first month. We play we play New York, Miami, New England, and Buffalo. That's our first month. So if we can go 3-1 in that stretch where we lose to Buffalo, I will take that as a Ravens fan, personal sense. So that's why I like the Baltimore Ravens here -7 and the Baltimore Ravens straight up. The next game, the Commanders over the Washington Commanders over the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is one to where I'm just gonna trust the Washington staff. And I know that's maybe a mouthful to say, but again, Jacksonville, they made a lot of improvements. They spent the most amount of money getting guys like Brandon Scherf, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. They're going to get Travis Etienne back. They brought in Doug Peterson as head coach. They didn't have a kicker, even though I know they picked up a kicker. James Robinson's still recovering from an injury. They have they traded Laviska Shenault to the Carolina Panthers. It's kind of weird. They still have Shaquille Griffin. They still have some other, they brought in Trayvon Walker with the number 1 overall pick. And I think this Jags team, if Trevor Lawrence can improve or Doug Peterson can really make that kind of an impact on the team, we'll have to wait and see. But at the end of the day, I just think with the Commanders, Ron Rivera and them, they understand what's at stake for him and his job. I think the Commanders, even though they want to have Chase Young and they have some other, holes, they had their running back, Brian Robinson, who was the one that got shot in the attempted robbery last week. I just think the Commanders are a better football team. I think, could the Jaguars win? Yeah, and I would be a little surprised. But I just, again, I'm going to trust the home field advantage. I'm going to trust Carson playing okay. Even though as much as crap as Carson got, and I'm not the biggest Carson Wentz fan, but at the end of the day, he did throw 27 TDs and 7 interceptions last year. He had an 80 or a high 80 rating as a quarterback. And I just think he'll play better than Trevor Lawrence this year, you're in this game. And I think in a way, Washington's defense with Jonathan Allen, with De'Aaron Payne, with William Jackson, with some of the guys that they brought in. I believe they were going to bring back John Bostic. That's a good enough defense that I think they can stifle Jacksonville in the first game. I think the only thing that you could say or you could argue is, okay, Carson, Doug. Doug knows Carson's tendencies, so we'll find out how that goes. So that's why I like Washington here -3 and Washington straight up. The next game, the Carolina Panthers over the Cleveland Browns. I am taking the Carolina Panthers here predominantly off of the quarterback. I know the Browns have the clearly better roster in pretty much every way you could argue maybe receiver, especially with Shenault, who I just said, coming to Carolina. But at the end of the day, it's Jacoby Brissett, and Jacoby's been a career backup for the most part, and the spot starts he's been in, he does not win a lot of them. And Baker, as much as I'm not the brightest Baker fan, I think that he was going to be the one that won this job in Carolina from the beginning. And I think he is the right guy to save Matt Rule's job for a 4th year, because I do believe the Carolina Panthers, to save Matt Rule's job, have to go at least 9-8. I think Baker gives them the best chance to do it. I like the front 7 of the Carolina Panthers: Derek Brown, Brian Burns, who is one of their better pass rushers. They have J.C. Horn coming back along with C.J. Henderson. They lost Gilmore, who went to Indianapolis, but that's fine. But I like this Carolina Panthers. They have Yetur Gross-Matos. They have Jeremy Chin. They have a good enough team, especially with a healthy Christian McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey and Chubb kind of cancel each other out, and Chuba Hubbard and Kareem Hunt. I think Kareem's better than Chubb, obviously. But I think the Panthers, with their expectation, with some of the offensive line moves they made, they improved there. They brought in Bozeman. They brought in Heckert. Like this is a good Panther squad that I think Baker outplays Brissett to win this game. So, should be a good one. And again, I would not be surprised at all if Cleveland won. But I'm going to take the Carolina Panthers here. Home field advantage. Baker's motivation against his former team. And I think Baker just outplays Jacoby in a tight one. So that's why Carolina here -2.5 and Carolina straight up. The next game, the Indianapolis Colts over the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans really didn't make that many big splashes. But I guess they got rid of Deshaun Watson, got draft picks, but they were going to be one of the top 5 bottom teams. Indianapolis, they improved their roster, and I do think if you really look at how much the Titans fell, I do think the Colts win the AFC South this year, but maybe the second round is their ceiling again. Maybe they win their first round playoff game, depending on who they play. But with the Colts, they brought in Stephon Gilmore, they brought in Yannick Ngakoue, they still have DeForest Buckner, they still have Kenny Moore, they still have a good roster for the most part. They still have the best guard in football, Quentin Nelson. They still have one of the 2 best running backs available with Jonathan Taylor, who I think anybody should have taken with the number 1 overall fantasy pick. I did in one of my leagues, but I digress. But I have the Indianapolis Colts here to win this game. They beat the Texans pretty well the last year in those 2 games that they played, and that was with guys like Paris, Campbell, They do have guys like Alex Pierce, Mo Alley Cox. I don't think Mo Alley Cox and Alex Pierce are going to be decent weapons. Michael Pittman should have a big year as the #1 Colts receiver. I don't think Michael Pittman's a genuine #1 receiver, but I do think he's good enough he is their #1 receiver. And I just think, again, the Texans, as good as they've been, as some of the decent pieces they have, and as Davis Mills played well enough to get this second year, I just don't believe that the Houston Texans really put up a competitive fight in this game. So that's like Indianapolis here, -8. Indianapolis straight up. The next game, the Tennessee Titans over the New York Giants. The Tennessee Titans, they drafted Malik Willis. They lost Harold Landry to a torn ACL. They do not have A.J. Brown anymore. They brought in Treylon Burks to replace him. They brought in Robert Woods as well from the L.A. Rams. And even with all the secondary issues, I still think they have Janoris Jenkins. They brought in Josh Gordon to the practice squad, which I thought was interesting. But looking at this Titans team, I just think they're playing the New York Giants, who, as much as people want to believe in the New York Giants, they really didn't do a lot of great things to tell me that they were going to be improved, or you have to sell me on. As bad as Ryan Tannehill is, he's not as bad as Daniel Jones. Derrick Henry will outrush Saquon by a mile. They have just a better receiving core. And I just think the Titans, I think they're going to let Malik play some, and I think that's going to be a difference, but I just think the Titans just clearly are better than the Giants. It's really not that hard for me with this one. Could the Giants compete? Maybe. Dayball, I like him as a coach. I think he'll do well, but, we'll see. But that's why I like Tennessee here, -5.5, and Tennessee straight up. The next game, the Green Bay Packers over the Minnesota Vikings. This one, it was too low of a thing to not pick the Vikings, but I might have hedged on this one depending if this was 3 or 4. Because I do think the Vikings have a good enough roster to compete. I'm going to take the Packers here because I'm going to take the quarterback over the team. I think the Vikings have a better overall team than the Green Bay Packers. But I think Aaron Rodgers is that much better than Kirk Cousins that he wins this game. It should be a great game, and hopefully he does not play like he did week 1 last year against the Saints, where he threw 3 interceptions and they got blown out. And for the Vikings, for Kevin O'Connell as their new head coach, this is their first big step. And I think, if he can pass this step, it really will tell you if the Vikings can genuinely win this division, because if he can beat them in week 1, even if it's the home game, the Vikings, I think at that point, should be maybe considered co-favorites with the Packers, and it will kind of shape my mind saying, okay, the Vikings winning the division is not as nearly as far-fetched as I think it is. So that's why Green Bay here, -1.5, and Green Bay straight up. The next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Arizona Cardinals. This is all about DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins not playing pretty much swayed the momentum for me. I don't think A.J. Green, Hollywood Brown, and those receivers, they kind of compare to what I think Mahomes as a quarterback is, with Juju, with Mecole Hardman, with Travis Kelce, with Sky Moore, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I know they have Rondale Moore, and they have A.J. and Hollywood Brown, and Andy Isabella, and Zach Ertz. But I just think at the end of the day, with that suspension, that pretty much shifts the field in Kansas City's favor. But I think with Kansas City's loss on defense for some of the players they had, some of the transactions they had to make, I think that the Arizona Cardinals can cover the 4.5. And then finally, the last few games, real quickly, the Los Angeles Chargers, that's why I like the Kansas City Chiefs here, straight up the Arizona Cardinals +4.5. And finally, the last 3 games, the Chargers over the Raiders. This is one to where I'm going to trust that even though the Chargers do not have J.C. Jackson for this game, that's going to be huge against Devontae Adams, I think the Raiders' offensive line, losing Leatherwood and just how bad that line is overall, I think that the Chargers' pass rush will be able to come home a bit more often compared to what Devontae Adams can do against the Chargers' secondary. I think because the weapons are about the same, I think the quarterback play, I think Herbert's a better pure quarterback, but Derek Carr is a better resume. And I just think, again, the Chargers, this is the second most talented roster in the league, and I genuinely believe that they will show that against this Raiders team, who I think will finish 3rd in the division and maybe make the playoffs if they're lucky. So that's like the Los Angeles Chargers here, -3, and the LA Chargers straight up. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas is not nearly as good as they used to be due to all the off-season transactions and movements, and the Bucs, even with their offensive line injuries, they usually beat Dallas pretty well, and Brady's never lost to the Cowboys in his career, so I think that continues even in Jerry's world. Should be a fun game, and if Dallas plays like they did week 1, should be fun, but I think Tampa wins that one. That's why Tampa Bay -1.5, Tampa Bay straight up. finally, Denver over Seattle. Denver's clearly the better roster. Russ, can beat all 31 teams. I think he does it well. And that's it. So those are all my picks. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. And until next time, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Till next time, so long.